Right, I think we'll make a start. Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Eleri, curator at October Gallery. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the space today. Lineages is a group show that reflects on the idea of line both in concept and form and presents 10 different artists' work. So please take time after the exhibition to look around and enjoy. It's my great pleasure to have two of the artists featured in the exhibition with me here today. So we have Eleanor Lakelin, whose works you can see to the left of us here, and then Junko Mori, whose works are also to the right of her there. So without further ado, this discussion will delve into these artists' practice, and I'm excited to ask them lots of questions. The talk will run for about an hour, and then you'll have the opportunity at the end for about half an hour to ask any questions. So do have a think as we go along of what would excite you to ask about their work. We're going to dive straight in. So I'll kind of be moving between you both. So I'd love to begin with the foundation materials in your practices. If you each could describe your kind of relationship with that material when you began working with wood or metal, respectively, and what initially drew you to that material. So Eleanor, if we start with you.
Okay, my material is wood, and I didn't start working with it until about 30 years ago, but I was very drawn to it even as a child. I grew up on a farm in quite a remote area of mid Wales and spent a lot of time wandering around woods and rivers, and I collected bones and gnarled pieces of wood, and I was somebody who filled my pockets with things and felt very much that by being connected to, by touching objects or pieces of material in my pockets, I could be connected to a memory and a place. And a lot of those were to do with trees. I think if you grow up in the countryside, you kind of navigate your world through trees. And wood in particular, it completely sort of made sense to me even then. I think I loved everything about it. I love the fact that it has a kind of human lifespan. It feels very, it lives for 100 or 200 years. You know, it is very similar to us. I like the way it smells. I like the way it feels. I like the fact that it moves and cracks, and it's even when it has been felled, it's still, there's evidence of all the life forms that lived on it and through it. So I just find it endlessly. I can find endless things to explore with it, and I think it's the warmth of it and the fact that it feels very human.
Yeah, I love that. And you've said with your work that you kind of work with the life force of trees, and so there's this really nice energy or immediacy, I guess, with that.
Yes, I definitely feel like it's it's just not inert. It has its own. It's not like I'm not getting something out of a bag. You know, it has had its own life, and all of that, like us, the biography of its life, whether it struggled or it flourished, is written in the fibers of its being, and it's a matter of trying to bring that out and to kind of make that substantiated, I suppose, and to make it manifest, to kind of explore the narrative of its life, my life, and the life of it now as a sculpture.
Wonderful, thank you. And Junko, same question. What kind of initially drew you to metal as your kind of founding material?
Okay, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this gallery, and then great to meet you all. I'm originally from Japan, and I did, since when I was a little bit like Eleanor, I love just fiddling with everything. And so when I was at major age, at 10, I already knew I wanted to be artist or maker. And then so I enrolled myself to Musashino Art University in Tokyo. And then that was 3-dimensional design. I done all the material, ceramic, textile, wood, and glass, plastic. All the metal was worst material for me. I was a bit cocky. I'm quite good with making. So I could knit, I could draw really well, and I could throw pot quite straight away. But metal was the opposite. It was, I struggle so much. And then it's a bit like harder to get this almost you chase, like a boyfriend and girlfriend. So my husband, for example, was so hard to get. So I kind of tend to be that character. I love pursuing. I want to find out something difficult to know is more trigger me to find out. So metal, when I found out blacksmithing was weeks of a struggle with fire and burning myself and hitting myself with hammer, my head. But once you learn this kind of posture and repetition, you gain the skill and very confident. Sometimes I kind of sort of drawn into almost chatting with my metal. Like when I'm really angry, they kind of sort of, I can see metal doesn't maneuver in the way I wanted. So that is a kind of weird, bizarre relationship I have with metalworking.
Yeah, well, that kind of fits quite nicely to my next question of how does metal kind of shape the way you think and work, like the dialogue that you have with the material as you're making?
Yeah, completely. So as I mentioned again, I'm a bit cocky, but I really like making, but I was quite good with my hand. So I could reach certain level of perfectionness. But when I was 18, I questioned a lot of so what? Like it's just showing off the skill you gain. But if I chose metal, probably that's a less show off because I struggle through the process, and such a weird reason to choose material. But that was that. But more I learned different material, that materiality itself sometimes lead to a certain new idea. So it's often, I don't have to listen my own brain. I just listen to the material. The metal seems to be quite good fit with me.
Yeah, I love that you're kind of drawn to it because it's a challenge as well. That's wonderful. And you studied forgery at Camberwell College of Art, was it?
Yeah, so in Musashi University in Tokyo first, and then that was metalworking was only 2 years, so third and fourth, that was 4 years course. So end of second year, I had to choose one material, and then I chosen metal. So only 2 years in metalworking. When I graduated, I didn't feel I could call myself professional. So I was poor and I had to take jobs. So I became welder in a factory for 1 year in Tokyo. So it's nothing arty. It was just welding, just staircase and handrail and gutter stuff. But I loved it. I learned most technical things that year, and then I saved all my money to come to London and study in Camberwell College of Art. That was silversmithing and metalworking course. So they had a forge, but incredible tutors, so like a top leading silversmithing people, Simone and Hans-Stoffer, so many people. Taught
wonderful.
me. Very lucky.
I love that as well, that kind of combination of both, coming to the art school after, but yeah, that real kind of foundational coming from just being in industry and learning it hands-on. And then back to Eleanor, how do your materials shape the way that you think and work?
Well, it's quite interesting listening to Junko because I trained as a cabinet maker, so I worked as a cabinet maker for quite a long time, and that taught me an awful lot about wood, about the properties of wood, about the challenges of wood. And I started doing what I do now because I realized that I preferred everything that was on the floor of the workshop that I'd thrown away, that was too dangerous to kind of make into a piece of furniture that might last forever. And so I found those bits that were all gnarled and decayed and rotted far more interesting than the actual perfect pieces of wood. So, and I think, I mean, I have gradually honed the materials that I use down to a very few trees, because I found that I can there's a kind of enough room for me to explore ideas of time and fragility and survival and all sorts of things through a very few trees. And so I think it was, when you talk about challenge, Junko, I think it was when I discovered burr that I kind of, I just felt like I had discovered this really interesting life force in trees that could, it was unbelievably challenging to work with, because it doesn't kind of, it's covered by bark. It's very difficult to use. It doesn't follow any of the rules of growth. It is kind of anarchic and chaotic and unruly, and it often doesn't do what I want it to. But it talks so beautifully. This this burr. This is this wild kind of growth on certain trees, that it's a kind of reaction to stress, and it's lots and lots of little buds or small branches that the tree throws out to kind of to protect itself and to regenerate itself. And it's such a wonderful kind of dynamic force of nature that I've always found it that it can give me endless possibilities of exploring the idea of loss or fragmentation or and survival. That anyway, yeah. Sorry,
No,
I think
beautiful.
I've gone off on a
no,
tangent.
Perfect. Well, this leads quite nicely into kind of what techniques do you use? I mean, you're saying about kind of the revealing of the bark and this kind of thing, and we also have some images that we can pull up on site as well.
It sort of depends. The piece that is right in the far corner, which is made of sequoia grown in Britain, which is the other kind of work that I do, and that is much more, it's a piece of material, it's a piece of wood, and I work with that by, I put it on the lathe and I turn a shape and I hollow it out using, as it spins on the lathe, I'm holding a tool, a sharpened piece of metal against it by shaving to empty out the middle, and then I'm carving away. I mean, obviously, wood is it's about subtracting material, about removing, refining material in order to find a line, in order to find a shape, finding the form in the material. And in the sequoia, it's much more planned in a way. I kind of know what I'm going to do. And so once I've turned and hollowed it, I'm taking away material to carve. And then because that wood, I choose it deliberately because it has a property that I think can talk very eloquently about time and the rhythm of growth across time, because it grows at a different rate during the year. It grows very quickly in the summer and it grows very slowly in the winter. And so after I've carved it, I can sandblast away the summer wood. And so if you look at it closely, you can see the kind of passage of time. And if you rub your hand along it, you can feel all the winters. That's what you feel, is all the winters, because I've got rid of the summer growth. So that wood is kind of, I have a plan. But with this, with horse chestnut burr, that is much more. It's much more a dialogue. Sometimes it's a kind of a shouty conversation, and sometimes it's, but it's. yeah, it's a different kind of work.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we can, Cara, if you could flick to the first image. So yeah, this is how the horse chestnut arrives in Eleanor's studio. And then the image on the right, sorry, back to that first one. So that's the lathe that's holding the wood there. And then on the next slide, we've just got some photos.
Yeah, so if the piece is very, very big, I use an angle grinder. So I directly carve into the wood using an angle grinder.
And then the next one.
Okay, yeah, so middle picture is the lathe. And, yeah, well, I don't know whether you want me to talk about that or not.
Well, yes, sorry, let me jump in. So I guess with the horse chestnut works, I guess comparatively to the sequoia one in the corner, there's a sense of scale and actually using different parts of the wood that you place together to form some, not all, but some of your sculptures.
Yes.
Whether you wanted to touch on that.
Okay, so the column vessel here is made of components. It's the tree doesn't grow like that. I'm choosing all the best sections from different parts of the tree, and then I turn each piece and hollow it, and then I leave it for many months for it to dry and move and crack and do all sorts of things that I can predict, and then I bring it back into the workshop, and then I hollow it out again in a more refined way, and then I join them up, and then I sculpt them together. So I start from one natural form that exists on one of the pieces, and then I sculpt everything else to kind of fit with that, so that it feels like it's a kind of, it's a whole piece, that it fits together kind of formally.
And then if we flick to the next one, there's this. So that's the kind of the pre-stages to the work that we see just to the left of Eleanor here. And then again, sorry. So yeah, just some great action shots, really. I had the great pleasure of going to Eleanor's studio and really seeing all the kind of making that's taking place. I wondered if you could talk a bit about the removal of the bark, which is a very kind of labor-intensive process.
Yeah, well, it's when I was talking about trees as feeling very human. I mean, the bark. It feels like it's the skin. It's kind of like lifting the skin of something to really trying to get at the anatomy, to kind of try and reach the soul, I suppose, of something. And the burr is hidden underneath the bark. And so when I start working with a piece, I spend longer looking and just feeling the bark before I start. I spend hours doing that. And I feel it's almost a bit like drawing or sketching, even though it's happening in my head. I'm trying to work out what direction or what form I can find in this tree, because whichever orientation I put the wood in will give me a completely different result, because burr doesn't grow symmetrically. It's completely asymmetric, and it joins the tree asymmetrically. And so all of those decisions that I make about orientation will make a difference in terms of what the final sculpture is, where there's a void, how deep is the void, does it go all the way through? So I spend more time looking and feeling and trying to read the bark, trying to read the skin of the tree than anything else. And then once I have got to that stage, Eleri's right, the bark is in, through, and all in every little void in these pieces, and it all has to come out in order for me to kind of finish the piece. So there's an awful lot of using of jeweler's tools and all kinds of little pins. I use wig maker pins and tools from all sorts of different professions to try and take away all of the bits of bark that have found their way, because the bark inclusions, they grow in and through this wood. It doesn't grow in a linear way. It sort of it winds its way in terms of growth.
Beautiful, thank you. we'll move back to you, Junko, in terms of the techniques of your practice. How could you talk us how you create these forms?
So back to this kind of annoying my character, I kind of pursue something I can't control is my thing. And so when I was the third year in university metalworking project, I wanted to make something just grow without my control. So I chop lots of box section and hundreds of them, could be thousands, and then I tack welded without thinking, without any outcome. And then the outcome was much more greater than I thought. And then since I thought, that's it, I really want to pursue. So when I make these objects, I spend 90% of my day is forging loads of components. The why I hand forge is every single component is slightly unique, like a human, like leaves on a tree or cell. It's actually nothing is identical. So when I hand forge each component is mathematically never exactly the same. So when I connect these hundreds of components after forging by welding, I let them grow as if just some little virus is growing on top of surface. And then, but I often love the outcome more than if I intentionally, deliberately design beforehand. So these objects are kind of outcome of accident, series of accidents, but under my subconscious control. I hope it does make sense.
Yeah, well, I love that it feels very intuitive, this kind of accumulative building and free form and everything. But each piece is a kind of like a nail that you hammer to get the initial and then add it on.
Yeah, so everything I buy, it's more varied, but majority of my work is based on 4, 5, 6 mil rods or square bars. So as simple as that, basically. Then I cut into half meter, 50 centimeter longs, and then I prepare 20 lengths each. So mathematically, am I correct? Like 60 rods in front of me, 4, 5, 6 mil rods. And then, because I worked in the factory, I built like this. It's quite welder-like setting. So how efficiently I can forge within an hour. So 60 lengths is a maximum because I can forge both end. That's 120 components. That's usually takes to me half an hour. I exhaust. But basically, I just constantly, so 5 rods is in the forge. So I can constantly back and forward, and then the hammering, it just never stop. Does that make sense? So I don't wait for the rod to get heat up, just because 5 rods is already in the forge. So that reason is very important for me. I found it quite meditative. And so because I had a panic attack when I was 25, and then so I overworked that time, and then so much stimulation in my head, and then so many people, you just chillax and then watch telly or something like that, and then go for pub and have a beer. But it didn't work, none of them. But so, one thing it's sort of secure me was back in forging, do the repetition, just a minor, constant repetition make my brain clear. Like scrubbing bathroom or toilet, it works as well for me. And then it's so important, just minor repetition which already you learned. So you must be clean my frontal brain. That's what I learned from my experience. So sounds kind of offshoot, but it's basically my work is a representation of my culmination of time of myself being so meditative and calm. So hopefully you can sense that.
No, definitely. I wondered if we wanted to watch the videos that you sent to us. If we flick, that's a nice point to see some footage of Junko
Yeah. So this is my drawing, like the very beginning when I was a little. I just constantly playing with watercolor. But this is the beginning. I just don't have idea. I just carry on just dot and blow, then dot and blow. So you can see the culmination line, and then creating the new line, and then these line became like a wave, like a river. And then I love that culmination. That's why when you invited me to do this exhibition under lineage, it perfectly fits me because it's everything I do is small line, culminate. It's a big sort of math. Yeah. Maybe you can show next.
Yeah, let's go to the next one. Perfect.
We have two brains. The frontal big brain, which deals with uncountable new information we receive on a daily basis. The major role of the small brain is for our motor skills and to coordinate voluntary movements. As an artist, I practice my brains to memorize my actions, and I end up not using the big brain as much after gaining the skill. I often feel time passes so quickly when I get into this mode, and I'm more relaxed after hours of repetitive actions. Hammering, digging, scrubbing, sanding, stitching, sweeping, chopping, polishing, drawing, kneading, folding, painting, drilling, mopping, climbing, sharpening, sewing, knitting, dusting, shredding, dicing, jogging, washing, tapping, filing, coloring.
Nice. It's really nice to see how your drawings really relate to your sculptures and you're thinking about line, but then when you come to the sculpture, it's that free accumulative process. But as you say, it's kind of already there in your mind anyway.
This is really luckily the beginning of COVID-19, 2020. Bangor University led gallery called Pontio. They had money, but they didn't know how to spend it on because artists can't do physically together in a gallery. So gallery shut, and then they gave us funding to create something online, something filmed in. So forging thing is we have to keep the distance. It's ridiculous. It was so hard to film, but it was such a good opportunity because I know as a metal worker, but I never had a chance to talk about my repetition and my anxiety issue and panic attack and these things so relevant to lots of young generation. I wanted to just speak up, and then they gave us the opportunity. So basically just showing about repetition is kind of sort of good for anything. Could be any domestic repetition. This could be good.
We'll come back to that thought as well. But so nature is a very strong presence in both of your practice. So I guess, Eleanor, back to you. Could you speak about the importance of nature and how that translates into your work?
I think I'm interested in the rhythm of growth, I suppose, in nature over time, and the way that the natural elements wear away, erode landscapes and material. And so, for example, you can see in the piece at the end there that idea that that rhythm of growth stays in the material, and that you can feel that structure of growth in when you touch it, and it can remind you of nature. I think also, I suppose, growing up in where I did, I found it a solace or a refuge, and I think nature has this kind of healing thing. And I certainly, for me, if I climbed to the top of a mountain, I could see myself in the landscape, or as such a small thing in the kind of cosmos, and it made any feelings that I had, better. It made it possible to, to be calmer. And I think also for me, it was very important to me to see. I've always loved the photos of somebody called William Garnett, who took these amazing black and white photos of landscape from a Cessna plane in the 50s. And the idea of experiencing nature or landscape as abstract forms. And I feel like that my work, hopefully, has some sense of that, the idea of that abstracted lines of landscape.
Yeah, I love that. I think your Sequoia one in particular, I think I was saying to you the other day, it makes me think of the sand dunes in Cornwall, which is where I grew up.
Oh yeah, and in fact, it was really inspired by a valley called the Malvach Valley, where in North Wales, that I spend a lot of time in, and I stay in a small place called Llywelyn, which is Yellow Hillside, and there's a point in the summer, as the sun is about to go down, where it kind of goes right around the valley, and there's a kind of a light that sweeps across the valley. And so that was the first piece that I started using that wood, where I realized that if I cut the tree so that I had a tiny bit of sap under the bark in the piece, which has less tannin in it than the rest of the heartwood, when I treat that piece with iron stain, which I make by boiling nails in vinegar, because there's less tannin just underneath the bark, it would give a lighter patch. So there were ways of using all the properties of the wood. So not just the rhythm of the structure of growth, which you can see in the lines. If you look, that piece is done looking down on a piece of tree, and so they're the growth lines that you see. But because I've carved away the wood to make lumps in it, those straight lines are now, they have to go up and over the lumps in the side of the piece. And so then it reminds you of landscape, I think, and contours. So it's looking at lines in the landscape.
Definitely. And I feel like that's with its form as well, there's that kind of sense of like an infinity and endlessness in the landscape as well, as it kind of continues.
Yes, yeah.
And I guess to also think about the sourcing of your materials, we were talking about on Friday, or I guess for those who don't know, what is to sustainably source felled trees? Where do you get them from? Are they hard to come by?
They're very hard to come by. Sequoia sequoia grown in Britain is actually not that hard to come by. A Cornish botanist brought the seeds from the Calderas Grove, the seeds of Sequoia giganteum in 1854. And many historic houses around Britain bought a couple of seeds. So if you go to almost any historic house in Britain, you will find at least 2 sequoia. Usually there are 2. But obviously what happened is that people started putting them in their gardens. And now, 150 years later, they're about 2 meters across. So, people in the villages are kind of going, I think you're going to kill us all. So they get felled occasionally because of worry about what they might do, and because sequoia is so big, if one comes down, it will keep me in wood for many years. But the horse chestnut burr is very, very difficult to find, and I used to find I would send out about 400 emails a year to every every person that had anything to do with wood in the country. And then usually I would get some kind of lead, and maybe I would find one tree a year. And now it's even less than that. So I'm very lucky if I find one tree every couple of years. But what it means is that I constantly go to my store of increasingly rotting wood, and I just have to find ways of using what I have. But what happens with wood over time, and certainly horse chestnut, is that if it's left somewhere damp, then obviously lots of other life forms and life forces start to work on it. And so if you look very closely at either of these pieces, you will see all these zonal lines of different fungi and different bacteria that have started to eat the cellulose and make their own life and trace their own lifetime across the pieces. And so I really like that is, you know, you can show that a tree is full of connections of other life forces. It's not just its own.
Yeah, I love,
existence.
Definitely come and get close to Eleanor's works, because you can see all these beautiful lines. And I think that's why conceptually I felt your work fit so beautifully in the show, in the sense of wayfinding as you're sculpting a work, and then all of these lines of bacterial life worlds that are kind of revealed within the foundation of the material. So beautiful. So similarly, Junko, with nature, how that kind of informs your work and practice?
Yes, so nature, it's really interesting to hear that a tree carry the whole memory of growth and torture, isn't it? And the weather and all these things is fantastic. But if you think about it, metal is quite interestingly extracted from the nature, but purified, like iron or silver or gold or all these things. But this one is mild steel, so it's kind of a little bit of alloy, but predominantly iron. It's so, in a weird way, it's not natural, isn't it? As a matter, but anyway, but it exists as a natural form, but the process isn't. But so that's interesting, because I grow vegetables, and since when I was little, my grandmother had a veg patch, and I just love touching soil. Nature was, I'm always interested in how things grow from it's a mystery, like a little tiny seeds carry so much information. The tiny, like a basil seed, it's so tiny, and then it's also doesn't pop. So beautiful 2 leaves, curvy, round leaves, and all of a sudden 16 times bigger. And then these where they're coming from, that energy. So I always interested in the process of growing form. So these pieces can be, I can add that components forever, infinitely. I can, but the scale represents almost the time I use, and it's so quite sort of, it's really interesting to hear that kind of materiality is kind of, my material can be seen as a non-natural, but I try to make something in a very natural, organic way as possible. So probably I'm craving, I don't know, the organic things when I touch metal. I don't know. It just makes me think more.
Well, I feel like in lots of your works, not just the ones we have here, there's lots of kind of microbiotic life that you'll kind of think about, or definitely this idea of regeneration, which continues across both of your practices.
Yeah, definitely, because my husband is a woodworker. He admires your work, by the way. But so I have a metalwork studio, and then a few steps away is a woodworking studio. And a woodworker is annoying because you need space, and you just keep stupid amount of wooden plank and rods and everywhere. So 4 times more than my space he needs, and then we always argue about that. And then, but when we're talking about his study about nature, like a soil, and we have 3 big compost bin, and then we sometimes you see these hundreds of worms coming out, a bit like my work actually. And it's just that sensation of belongs to nature. It is so nice. Wood is so natural, but metal is questionable actually. I always think about it, how I can be sustainable with the material, how not to waste. But just make me question. Sorry, I can't. This is not answer really. Isn't it? Sorry.
No, it makes sense. And I guess if we flick through to another picture on the slide, because I think this actually makes me think, Eleanor, what you said earlier about collecting things in your pockets and all the kind of bits and pieces that inspire you, because these are some images from Junko's studio. So the metal.
Yeah, so that I work with quite lots of different material, metal. I use silver, gold, bronze, and brass, copper right now. Because did you hear that silver price at the moment? It's stupid. It's all the silversmithing, British silversmithing, kind of be suppressed quite soon. It's so difficult to sustain. So I have to pause silver for a while. Good year, I think, because 3 times more material cost. It's stupid. But anyway, that's the silver components. And then
if you go to the next slide.
Yeah. So I do lots of components. I archive it, how I make it, write it down, and the shape. I got like about 240 different design of components. Yeah.
And the next one.
Yeah. So this particular piece on the left on your side is I went to Queen's Gallery in Buckingham Palace. Where was that? Da Vinci watercolor, not watercolor, Da Vinci's archive, but all the 2-dimensional sketchbooks and stuff. And that was 2019, I can't remember. And then I saw this drawing by Da Vinci. It's water. He did like a series of water study. So if you think about wind, water, cloud, all the natural things, it's not really got shape. So all these medieval artists have to discover new animated way of describing nature. So that is actually water, but it's really funny, isn't it? It's a bit like a little bubbles and swirl. But I never seen water like Hokusai, the same things like that famous wave. It's actually completely animated. It doesn't, natural wave doesn't look like that. So I kind of start questioning then that sort of drawing directly influence to make that piece, to make this kind of bubbly, swirly, solid.
Yes, yeah. Which I think is such a beautiful interpretation of his drawing, and then very much with your own twist, and then also looking again to kind of growth, and they almost look like fern coils, and so water, but then also leaves and life as well in a different way.
Yes, it's strange. It's like a water. It's kind of by Da Vinci. That some genius artist gave that shape of water in that way, and then that all of a sudden became life. And I love that because it doesn't have a tangible shape, but artists can give that shape a life in a way.
Yeah. And this series is called Propagation Project.
Yeah.
Is that a wider kind of overarching continuous series? If you'd like to explain.
So this is so when I graduated Camberwell College of Art year 2000, master silversmith Hiroshi Suzuki needed hand. So okay, I come up and then I just helping. His speed of hand raising silver was crazy. I just annealing work for him, but his hammering was faster than me annealing the silver. I've never seen anything like it. It was like almost sports, like a long marathon. But yeah, sorry, what was the question?
Just the Propagation Project series. So these are just 2 from that wider series. Is that one you've been doing for a long time?
Yes.
What does it mean?
Yes. So when I was working with Hiroshi, and then I had a chance to, I've been given some free space to develop a new idea. Then the propagation series started because like hoping my work propagate infinitely as a form of a 3-dimensional study. And then, so my work is all based on series. It's because I don't conclude work. For example, these pieces are still ongoing study, like a Da Vinci's sketch. It's not outcome or answer for me. It's a step to create the next piece. So yeah, so that's why all the series is called propagation. This is I don't know number some hundred something.
Okay,
but
wow.
yeah, still.
Yeah, and the other one, the title of this other one closer to you is called Textured Leaf.
Yes.
I believe.
So this is much more doesn't related to any existing shape or drawing at all. It's my sort of, when I'm forging, I just happened to discover how to twist that flattened components that time. I just wanted to use that shape and propagate from the core to explore, like one components create one unit, like a pine cone, then create the pine cone to other, like a fractal,
Yes.
like a dot to create the unit to create another. So that was kind of my experiment.
Yeah, which is beautiful because I feel within the individual pieces you see a leaf itself, and then but also this idea of a fractal or building out.
Yeah.
It's really lovely work. So coming back to Eleanor, with perhaps we can focus kind of specifically on your ones. I know this one closest to us you made is a newer-ish work, a new direction for you.
It is. Yeah.
Whether you want to talk about that one first.
Okay, shall I talk about this one first or last?
Up to you. Up to you. Sorry, that's a bit backwards, isn't it?
No, maybe. Also, I also work in series, and the piece of the far side, which we talked about the rhythm of growth and wearing away and using sandblast to kind of speed up erosion, basically, to wear away things. And then, and that series is called Time and Texture. And I use sequoia for that because it's the best wood to demonstrate those ideas of erosion and wearing away of material. And then this piece in the middle is from a series called Echoes of Amphora, which I've been doing for some time. And that is the sort of, it's not really about that that I have studied Greek amphorae in massive detail. It's more about the idea of dimensions of time, I think, that I want in a piece to us to have this kind of juxtaposition in our head of this kind of cultural millennia, the idea of classical form that we all sort of have in our heads, really, this idea of form that is about poise and balance and restraint, and then juxtaposing that with sort of geological time and this mad surging growth of Burr, this kind of dynamism of nature. And by putting them both in one piece, the idea that it will heighten both of them and that we'll get a sense of, I suppose, fragility. I think it's because I really like the idea of kind of imperfect beauty, of things that are disrupted, where the line is fragmented and disrupted. I find ruins of buildings far more interesting than a building that is still there. I just quite like that idea that these things built for, for often to do with power, that they're so much more interesting when and poignant, I suppose, when they're disrupted and worn away, and they can mean something else. And so for me, to have those two dimensions of time in one piece and for them to sort of collapse so they sort of it still makes sense, those different dimensions of time. So that's a lot of the work in that series has some kind of classical form with this very disrupted surface. So you can see the line of the form just about. And it's all about how far I can push that, and whether I can push the readability of the vessel as far as it can go. And if I keep too much of the classical form in it, it just doesn't feel kind of edgy enough, and I don't like it. So it's constantly trying to get a balance. And obviously each piece is... like I never know. It's sort of like a dialogue when I'm working with it. I have to keep stopping to see whether I'm going to kind of miss some kind of dimension, because no piece of bird wood is ever the same. And it obviously has its own kind of ideas. I don't know if you've ever read Roger Deakins' Wildwood. He says, in any collaboration, trees have their own idea. You know, it is the collaboration, and they do have, and sometimes it just simply doesn't work. And however hard I try, it still remains a piece of wood. And obviously, I'm looking for it to mean something to me, that point at which it starts to mean something. And so I've used vessels for a very long time as a way of working. And this piece here is new, and it doesn't have a title yet. It's called Gateway, just because it feels like it is the beginning of something else. It's the idea of just trying to free carve into the material and what the material feels like it was giving me, and so it's done with an angle grinder, just literally carving. I wanted it to feel like, I suppose, that kind of primordial bubbling of energy, because that's what burr is, this kind of energy. So in spite of the fragility and the of the tree, obviously struggling, it is a dynamism. And so, yeah, I wanted it to be like cells kind of rushing, surging over themselves. And also I wanted there to be, for it to be sort of directional, so you kind of looking through it and out and maybe into something, another realm that I'm not quite sure of yet, which is why it doesn't have a title. But, so yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think the kind of circular aspect of that work and looking through and that kind of potentiality, and then also for me, but I mean both those works with the colour that you've lightened them to kind of give that sense of tying back to the like archaeology and earth and bones almost as well.
Yeah, but when I look at my work now, I think I actually think nothing much has changed in 60 years, because I used to have my pockets full of bones and gnarled wood. And so I look at my work now and I just think, like, that's just the same thing. And I remember I read something that Barbara Hepworth said, where she said, we find out what we want to, oh my God, and now I'm going to forget it. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that because I'm too nervous and I've forgotten.
And how with the...
No, I've just remembered now.
Go for it, please.
She said, what we want to say is formed in our childhood, and it takes us the rest of our life trying to find a way to say it. And so when I look at this, I kind of feel like, yes, literally, it really speaks to me standing there with shells and anything where you could touch, you could feel. I feel like for me, material and tactility is kind of really basic. I understand the world through touch, I think. Like I feel like it's our first sense, isn't it? Before we can see or anything, we reach out to touch, and that's how
Definitely.
express myself, I think.
Both of your works as well, I think when people come to view it, it's kind of like that thing of not being able to touch something in the art gallery, but both your works infer that kind of need for immediacy with the material. And I think also with your works in terms of scale is interesting, particularly with the middle work, that it's kind of life-size, it has its own presence, it kind of commands your attention.
I think it does for me too. It feels like I kind of communicate with it. It feels like it sort of begins to have a presence. And when I have quite a few of those in my studio, if I'm doing a collection, it just feels like they're kind of like when I leave the studio at night, I'm kind of going, okay, right, I'm off now. I'm not leaving this whole group of presences that, I may shut the door and then they'll all kind of party or something. And I think it's because it just does feel to me. It's always felt to me human. And so when I'm carving, I try and make it, I think, muscles or, I want them to feel both tree and person, for them to have a presence, I suppose, to be animated. And so, yeah.
Yeah. And you just touched on then, but I think, again, what's beautiful in both your works is this idea of touch and repetition and time, both time as in gone into the making, but time over histories. And as you're saying, the vessel forms and the histories of objects and things like that, if you wanted to.
Well, I think, I don't know why. I've spent such a long time kind of using the vessel form. And there's something about it that I just feel like it's such a human, it feels like it's the first cultural device, really. A writer called Ursula K. Le Guin, if you know her, she wrote a beautiful small book called The Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction. And in it, she talks, there's so many themes in it, but one of them is the idea that almost certainly the first cultural device was probably not a spear, but almost certainly was a way of carrying things because, Neolithic or Paleolithic humans almost certainly really ate seeds and fruits and whatever. And once you'd walked miles to get them, you'd probably want to bring some back. So it was the whole idea of it's a human thing, the pot, the bowl, the container, the receptacle, the recipient. And so it's I think it's sort of it just, we use it not only for kind of sustenance in terms of seeds and wine and water and food or whatever, but we also use it in such a ritual way, the vessel, as containers of our hopes and dreams, as ways of accompanying ourselves to the next life or whatever, or what that has happened in many, many cultures. And so it feels like it's such a sort of, it's a special thing to be part of that line or path of people from deep in the past who made, from dynastic stone vessels in Egypt to me in my little studio making vessels now to in the future. It just feels like a very human thing to try and explore. And then this is really feels a bit more like the Möbius strip, sort of maybe I'm kind of daring to think about things which don't have an inside and an outside.
Yeah, with that kind of absence and presence, as your eye kind of is taken around the work, you realise that there are these hollow edges or entrances and kind of forms.
Voids in the pieces,
Voids,
yeah. And I think that the vessel kind of... You see, if you turn wood, generally, you turn it very thin. So I completely do the opposite of what is a normal thing to do when you turn wood on a lathe, because I leave it very thick, because I want not only the outside surface and an inside, but I really love that third space between, where I feel like all this kind of sculptural form can happen. And so that's why, I make vessels in the way I do, and I orientate them in the way I do, so that I can leave this very, very sculptural space.
Oh, great. And then I kind of wanted to return to this idea of line, which is the kind of concept of the exhibition. The kind of conceptual form of line, both line originally as a kind of a gesture, a drawn line, a mark, but more broadly to think about it within sculpture as a kind of form of wayfinding, or lines as in communication lines amongst people throughout humanity, transmissions of culture. So a very broad, encompassing interpretation of line. And whether each of you could reflect on how line maybe fits into your practice, whether you reflected on the exhibition concept and or just more generally. Junko, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, so more generally speaking, so I quite drawn to crafts sort of a process like a hand forging, like in Japan, it's kind of connected to sword making more, but that's probably the main reason I left Japan. But the hand forging, for example, or wood carving is back to such a long time ago. Humans started discover that technique, and then so I'm standing in a line of the human discovery, like a culmination of a foundation I'm standing on. So I like that notion of a sort of I'm passing on this metalworking skill to the next generation. I'm now over 50. I really want to pass on that lineage of art. Nicely concluded.
Yeah. Very good.
Sorry, I didn't think that. Sorry.
No, perfect. And Eleanor, what does line mean to you?
Well as obviously the line of, as in the lineage of people who make material, make vessels, whatever. When I was thinking about it, I was thinking what's quite interesting is, if you imagine a tree, I mean, it feels like it's a very vertical, isn't it? A very vertical, upright line. But in fact, when I think of lines, obviously, my own lines are always fragmented and complicated, and like the line on the inside of this piece is, and when you're using wood, because you're reducing, you're always finding the line. I mean, you're looking for the line. You're having to, you're not kind of putting it there. You're having to take things away to make the line, to search for the line. And but I was thinking about trees in terms of this vertical line. If you imagine, when you're a child and you draw a tree. But actually, what we're finding now is that underneath the ground, that our lives are about this connection of very, very complex lines, and that whole idea of lines in nature and the connectivity of fungal. We talked slightly about fungal growth, but the idea that underneath this upright line is this whole microcosm sort of fungal network. And in the book, Suzanne Simard writes a book about searching for the mother tree, which is all about those connections that exist, the complexity of nature that we haven't really kind of accepted in some way up to now, that the complexity of trees, that underneath the ground, if you put all of those roots and fungal roots into a line, it would be 13 million miles long from one tree. So it's a kind of, it feels like it's an entanglement of lines, and like our lives, I suppose. It's an entangled life.
Definitely. And that kind of the unseen as well. I love that kind of looking beneath the surface and into the soil. And then Junko, earlier you were talking about line as an axis when you're making, which is a really wonderful reflective thought. So I wondered if you could explain that as well.
Yes, so technically my concept is established through my doodle when I was really little, like you saw earlier. But so it's really interesting, like it's line, it's the combination of dot. That's how I see. And then the line is the, surface is a combination of line. So it goes on and on. The like of cubic things is a combination of surface. So it's a kind of assembly of small components. Like my work is always how I build lines in a sense. So I found it quite. I wish I could show that one of the video. I don't know, but when I'm kind of basically making the components, then when I'm assembling the piece, I'm basically welding from behind. So I can't see what's going on behind the scene, basically. So I'm kind of looking for the pathway or line of movement of my components without seeing it. So that's the kind of sometimes the kind of surprise. So if I see so a few hours later welding, I kind of flip it and I see the weird kind of sort of not controlled like line. So almost a kind of control the line. If that makes sense. So that's, for me, it's more organic, and then I found it interesting use of line in my practice.
Yeah, great. I've just got a couple more questions and then we'll kind of pass to the audience. I wondered if you have any kind of recent or upcoming projects that you're excited about that you might want to share or thoughts.
Yes, thank you for asking me that. Yeah. But yeah, basically, I've been pouring this time and energy for this project called Coexist. Coed means in Welsh is a tree. By the way, I live in North Wales, and then since I moved there 15 years ago, nature and surroundings is so more important than ever. I can see the polluted sea and it got cleansed last 10 years. And I think rubbish control in the government is way better than ever, but still lots to do. Then we saw this 150 years old beech tree fallen in nearby museum. And then me and my husband went, can we have it? Then we process it and then we distribute it to more than 80 artists. So basically 80 more artists making something out of it. And then this exhibition is coming up this May, so I'm so busy. I just hats off to gallery people to curate and manage the exhibition. I didn't realize how hard that is. So I'm so going through this process. So thank you so much.
Nice.
You
I'm
guys.
excited to hear about it.
Yeah, but that's the project coming up. So if you could follow my website or Instagram, there's more information coming up.
Great.
Thank you.
And Eleanor, any exciting projects on the horizon? I mean, I'm working on a lot.
I have a show coming up in New York, and with a second edition of the same thing in Paris with a painter from France. So that's what I'm doing in terms of exhibitions. But really, I'm excited to be getting back to the studio and to see what happens with this kind of work. Because when I've just made a new piece or I've gone in a slightly different direction, then obviously I'm kind of excited to see how it might continue or how it might turn out. So
yeah, nice. Itching to get back. And
so I'm
continue.
actually itching to get back and get the boiler suit on and
keep going. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. We're now going to turn over to you guys. So if anybody has any questions from the audience, we'll have a roaming mic, which will be my one.
I'm going to pass it back because...
I have a question for Eleanor. Again, I'm picking up on the connective thread between form and idea, between concept and form. And I'm referring to the two works just next to you. And I'm wondering why they're so pale and if you've covered them with something and if you have, what it was and what your decision was about using that particular material.
Yeah. I mean, they're because of the bone thing from when I was a child. I always wanted to make something that had that elemental feel of it, of something bleached out by the sun, by natural elements. And so so I look everywhere for horse chestnut really because it's such a pale wood, and then. I wash it over with what's used in the restoration of furniture. If they're trying to wash out a piece, if they're putting in a new leg, they kind of wash out, try and take some of the colour out of the wood so they can put it all back in together. So I wash it over with that and then wash it and leave it out in the sun. And the idea of it really is, I think it goes back to William Garnett and the black and white photos, the idea that by making something slightly more abstract, it feels like it can kind of talk to more universal themes, I suppose, that it can express it. It can express something, that it can move beyond the material that it's made of. That it can move beyond the vernacular and talk about other things, about fragility or survival, or that because it has this slightly mysterious, kind of ghostly, ethereal quality to it.
First, I want to say thank you so much. It was absolutely fascinating to hear about your processes. I'm interested in the line of the making of the pieces from the conception to the completion, and perhaps thinking about the end of that. So you've talked about how you're responding intuitively, how it isn't obviously a predefined path that you're taking. But could you talk about how you know you've reached the end of that? How I guess, with the last sort of marks that you make, or the pieces that you add, or the pieces you take away, how you know that is it for that particular piece, and how it feels.
So when I did like a 9 days of forging, there's a pile of components in front of me. Then I started welding one by one. So basically let them grow. So obviously sometimes I overforge, there's a pile of components left, or the piece, and then the end up piece is so small. So when I'm kind of sort of stopping it is because when I see the beautiful moment. This is such a crucial thing, like because I can carry on welding I want to, but I had to stop, and then so. But it's crazy. I quite spontaneously can see that end line. They almost like piece start screaming, shouting, "Can you stop now?" And then if I carry on, and it does happen sometimes when I does stop communicating with my work. Maybe I'm busy with a crying child behind me or something like that. Then that piece often goes to on the floor on the studio for ages because I never throw away. Because like that's kind of old growth, accidental, even more accidental parts of my work, and then 3 or 4 years later I go back to it, and that became ginormous piece, oddly grown piece. That's always somehow going to museum. This is crazy. Always like more uncontrolled I get, the piece being appreciated by museum. It's a bit strange, but yeah, that's how I work.
Okay, and I think I'm slightly different. So there's kind of two. First of all, pieces get finished when the van driver who's come to collect them insists that they put them in the van, because otherwise I'm still sand. I can find something that I can just keep doing. But there is a point when I sort of feel like I know that it's not finished, but I know that it's going to mean. There is a point when I'm turning, I'm stopping, and I'm turning, and obviously it goes on for days and days and days, but there is a point at which I feel like it's beginning to mean something, that it's stopped being a lump of matter or material, and it actually means something to me. And that doesn't always happen. I literally have just pulled out a piece from the work that is going to New York because it literally still feels like a lump of wood to me. I just cannot make it not. It just won't, transform in that way. And so, so I think it's, I have to just wait for that point, and you just, it's a lovely feeling, that feeling when you feel like you have found the form, that it's, now it's a matter of hours, but it's there. There's something is there that feels meaningful.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. It's been fabulous. I'm always fascinated by energetics, and I'm fascinated by energetics in the landscape. So my question is to Eleanor, but you might also want to talk to your work as well, about when I look at trees in the landscape, I always thought there's a rhythm that's going on inside that we can't hear, but we can see, and it's very obvious with the way the tree grows. I think you mentioned you work with 3 different types of wood.
Yeah, almost 2. I mean, I obviously, in fact, from now on, I won't be because I'm really struggling to find any. So I'm about to, change the habits of a lifetime.
So I guess my question is, because I can see the energetics, you're sort of going inside the tree and discovering the energetics or the rhythm you keep talking about. So my question is, if we could hear the rhythm of the trees, what would the different rhythms sound like? Would you have any idea? What's the music that you can hear inside those particular trees?
Well, I really wish I could remember. I don't know whether you were here on Wednesday night at the opening, because Suzanne Castle did this most beautiful speech where she talked about, it was about the rhythm of line, or the different ways that lines could be manifested. And she went through all of these beautiful Italian, musical kind of or not notation. I don't know what the word for it is, where you andante. So it feels like that, I think, that... that's probably what's happening it would sound like, I think it would sound like different things at different times, because I think that's the thing that I love about trees, is that literally, like the wrinkles on my face which tell you about my life, both good and bad, the biography of each tree is written in the fibers of its being. And so I think at times it would sound, melodic and calm and beautiful, and at other times it would be mad and, difficult and screechy and, because they are living things and they live in a society, which is what we're beginning to now understand, connected to other trees around them that they protect, support, etc. And so, yeah, I guess it would be like us, good days and bad. Yeah.
Can I ask the same question of Junko? Because one of the things, Junko, I realise is that you're using metal, which, as you work it, has its own sounds, its own symphonies. When you weld those pieces, I'm particularly thinking of the Leonardo da Vinci. I know a musician who would love to play that, because when you know the umbira, the African instruments, are just pieces of metal that are put into a piece of wood, and they're dong, 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 dong. There's a rhythm there. Can you play your music? Can you play music on these things? Because that one I can see will sound.
You were right. So we play these silly things, like especially that this one is quite dense, and then the hollow inside is actually not big. So if it's quite more sparse piece, and then there's a poking out units, and if you flick gently, it's gorgeous, like a ding. Then you can, so the lengths of different spike make it din, 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 like this. So one of the, I recorded in the Instagram, it's up like a few years back, and yeah, you're right, like each spike makes a different noise.
It has its own sound.
Yeah, and also the noise-wise is quite interesting. Sometimes it's, I don't know, this is kind of related to your question, but when I forging, the hammering noise, the video Pontio made, it's actually, the music is composed by this Baroness Semi C. She's actually, she composed from 3 different type of hammering noise from studio with the virus. So it's really interesting. If you could go back to my website, you can hear the music. It's a noise and then ting ting noise. It's like a hot forging and cold forging in silver. It creates such a different noise, and also the rhythm of the forging is quite interesting. It is a music, and it's a bit like a bird singing almost. If you're having a good time, the rhythm is so smooth. Then one of my assistants having hard time, I can hear it. Oh, she's having bad time. And so new assistant, beginner, it's horrible to listen. Like, yeah, there is a music to it in my practice. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Hello. Okay. Firstly, thank you for giving such a great conversation. Having such a great conversation. Really interesting to bring forward to quite, I guess, like primitive materials of like wood and metal into just one space, and just comparing both like the similarities and differences between the two. But just kind of speaking quite broadly, I know, Junko, you mentioned you had children. I was wondering what it's like being a female sculptor, being a female artist, and how it's influenced not only the choice of materials, like your influences, how it's changed, influenced, maybe forced like the pace of your creative career. Yeah, just curious about what it was like has been like to navigate this.
It's definitely a thing. Certainly for me, for many, many years when my children were small, I worked in the day with wood, but as a cabinet maker, and then I came home and I put the kids to bed, and then I went out to a workshop that I'd built at the bottom of the garden to do this kind of work for myself, really, because I didn't have the kind of bandwidth to move myself, to kind of move on, really. So all I could do was make it. But it meant that literally I worked from 9 till midnight sort of thing doing this. And then the next day went back to work. So, so obviously I absolutely, it is the thing that, things are slower. It's slower for you to kind of get your career going, because it's those are issues. However supportive however much support you may have, it's still is still different. But then sometimes I think maybe boundaries are, maybe that's not such a bad thing. I've often thought that it's very difficult, I think, for young people these days because, those boundaries that that I certainly had in terms of my children, that it made me kind of like really in those 3 hours, I just kind of really worked like a crazy person, and I did that for very many years until I could find enough space to change to do what I do now. So I don't know whether that answers that, but
yeah, I got 2 children and pain in the neck. So, like I'm an artist and I love making artwork, and sometimes looking after the cooking dinner and stuff, it's kind of became burden. But when my first one was 3, I realized, oh God, you can't do this to my child. And then I have to find a way to enjoy the process. And then luckily my husband is quite good. He's helping. I ask him to help, and then he doesn't answer. But yeah, he does do that. And then but this is a quite weird thing. I calculated it like year before I got pregnant, how much work I produce, and then after I gave birth, and pregnant and giving birth, and after that, and which one became more quicker is actually after. I was actually more productive after I had a child, because I realized probably I got 7 hours only. Then after I have to look after kids, so I was more concentrating probably. So it's really interesting, but I think it's just being female. And another story is that when I was in a factory in Tokyo, I used to have a shaved head, and I'm quite tall as a Japanese woman. So no one knew I was a woman, but I never been treated. But it's I don't know. It's because of that. But my colleague never dealt me like a female, weak colleague at all. And it's not like but they helped me when I couldn't carry stuff. It was quite equal, kind of in the industrial estate, and then I found it's quite weird, interesting. Like I've been asked a lot in the blacksmithing, kind of macho field, do you have any discrimination? Actually, I really haven't had it, and then maybe I'm really purely lucky person, but yeah, I don't know. There's an advantage, disadvantage in the physically, but I have been quite juggling, and it's been okay. That's all I can say. Yeah.
So my question is, Junko, you mentioned how you have kind of this tension between creating objects which are of natural forms, yet these materials that you use are inherently not necessarily natural. I wondered whether you had a preference between using steel or silver, and which one you felt more of a connection with.
Very interesting question. Then, so metal is such a bizarre substance. So 91, or it's big debate for that, but 91 elements in the periodic table is actually metal. So many different metal exist. And then when I was in university, first metal being introduced was copper seed. And then I hated it. I'm a writing project. It's supposed to be stretching forever. It's obvious, isn't it? If you hit metal, it's stretch. But somehow my vessel was shrinking. But it's a totally angle. It's a mysterious skill, apparently my professor said. And then, but that's kind of made me, so it's just me, weird personality. I drawn to something harder to get. And then, so obviously I really didn't like it, but more I tried to understand like steel, the hardness, and then when it's hot, where I can feel that on the hammer tip, I'm almost like I'm pushing clay with my fingertip. Once you sort of practice that much, your hammer tip is almost an extension of my arm, and then that is a feel. from the beginning to that sort of skill level you achieve, that's what I love about. So when I introduced in silver had a unique differences. So cold forging. So you heat them up and cool down, the molecule is loosened up. Then once you hit, it's kind of became rigid. But when you hold, so forging, it's actually the tip is harder than red hot steel. Does that make sense? And then also silver is often twist. Really, this annoying property. It's very chewy compared to steel. So every single copper is more chewier. It's bizarre. It's stick everywhere on the hammer surface. So, but I love that trouble. Every time I found this trouble, I always try to understand. So I don't have any preference, to be honest. I think each metal has a crazy property, and the more I discover, I love more about. So yeah, I don't have preferences. Yeah.
Okay. Eleri thinks that's time.
Yeah, unless we have any last question. But thank you so much. Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you, Junko.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.